Hello, welcome to Spirit Paranormal. I'm the founder, Chief Lawson, and today we're going to talk a little bit about security cameras. We're getting a lot of calls through and emails through our helpline about people who contact us and believe that their house is haunted solely because of evidence they're receiving on their newly installed or fairly newly installed video equipment. First of all, I want to say this video is not sponsored by any camera brands. Actually, I'm not sure any of them will even speak to us after we give out some of the details of how they work and so forth. A great deal of our emails have been about this subject in the last 6 months. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more people getting these cameras. They're very popular. They're somewhat reasonable. I'll explain that in a few minutes. But more people are getting them than they used to. And as a result, they're capturing things on them. A lot of them have alarm systems, so something happens or motion is detected, it immediately signals an alarm. Now, I want to say that if all you have is your camera footage, your CCTV camera footage, more than likely your home or property is not haunted. There's usually more than just footage that goes with hauntings. Not always. As I said before, there's exceptions to all rules in parapsychology, and no one case is a textbook case. There is no such thing as a textbook case. So the one thing I do want to say is though generally if that's all you have, you don't have a haunting. So rest assured, you can take a deep breath and say, wow, okay. And there's a lot of anomalies with these cameras that we need to discuss. And unfortunately, you're seeing more of them. It's a sad day this day and age, but most people live in areas where they, really they can't go without cameras. And then there's some that just want the security of having them. Old saying is that crime has no address, so it certainly can happen anywhere, even the best of areas, and even some rural areas. A lot of weird footage gets caught on these cameras, and people for the first time, without a great deal of experience, that have them and are shooting film on them, have never really got the experience of working with the cameras and understanding what they're seeing. I'll gladly tell you I have 11 cameras on my property, soon to be 12, and I live in a rural area that's pretty decent, but I still like to be able to, if I hear a noise or an alarm go out outside, I can look in the camera and I can tell if there's something there or not, so I know whether or not to get out of bed. Okay, for the first time in the last 10 years, cameras have become affordable. And when I say affordable, that's a tongue-in-cheek statement to a certain degree. Homeowners, where before were just part of the, cameras were just part of the commercial world. You've seen them around warehouses and places like that, but you really didn't see homeowners getting them. Today, this day and age, they're readily available in many different brands. Now, just so we understand, I don't want this to be a video on home security cameras, where to place them, nor promoting home security cameras, nor protesting the use thereof them. I'm simply explaining to you how they work and why they provide the data they do, and sometimes that data, a lot of times, that data is misinterpreted. So there are many types of cameras. These cameras, they share some properties, okay, and many of the properties they share is, one, they're low cost for the most part, okay. Actually, what you're paying for the cameras that you're getting off of Amazon in some cases, or at hardware stores or those areas, you could upgrade to a commercial camera and come out a lot better off. But they are low cost, and they are a lot easier to put in. For years, cameras took a company or someone who really knew what they were doing to do that. Small cameras have, the cameras have small camera iris lens, and the irises in the lens are very small, usually 3 millimeter or less. They have a short field of view, and by the way, if you don't understand these terms, hang on, we'll be discussing them in depth. They're shallow depth of focus, and they're expensive for what you're getting, really. You're paying a lot of money for a very cheaply made internal camera. Now, when I say, people are saying, well, Chief, how much should we pay for those? Well, it depends on the camera. I buy my commercial grade cameras. I can get an outdoor camera at cost for about $50 to $60. That's one camera, and it has to be hooked up. Now, I run different kinds of cameras. We're going to talk about IP and cabled cameras and what's the difference, and network cameras and so forth. Out of the consumer area, there's many different cameras. There's Ring, you see Aro, you see Nest, You've got Blink, Swan, YZ, and then of course you got your doorbell cameras, your Ring, and then some of the cameras that are perpetually attached to security systems like ADT or Simply Safe. And again, Chief is not saying that these are horrible cameras. I personally wouldn't use them, but for some consumers, they fit the need. So, one, they're super easy to install. These cameras don't have a lot of settings where you have to go and set the IP and the port call. You have to do port forwarding, and you have to get a DNS and supplier or service and all these things. They're all built in. They all come with that. Now, most of them are in Japan. And because there's virtually no configuration, this makes this extremely appeasing to the public. So these cameras really are very easy to install. Basically out of the box, plug and play. You stick them up and a little bit of wiring, and hey, you've got a system. And there's a lot to this, and there's a lot of videos on YouTube. So I'm not going to sit here and recommend any certain videos, but if you're putting up security cameras, I recommend you get into some of these security videos and talk about how to place them, what you want to see. You need to think about that. What are you trying to cover? If you're trying to cover your driveway, there's probably 6 different angles to cover it from. So which one's the best angle? Which one doesn't have incoming light, and so forth. So these are very important factors, and there's a lot of videos out there that will teach you everything in the world about those. This is not one of them. So we're going to talk about how cameras work. It'll be a little bit in depth, but I think it'll make a big difference in understanding. Once you understand how the cameras work, you can understand why you're getting the pictures that you are and why some of these are false positives. So with that, we will begin with the How Cameras Work series. Today we're going to talk about how cameras work, and we're going to specifically talk about stationary or fixed cameras. Now, stationary and fixed cameras are what most of you will use in your home. These are cameras that are permanently mounted to a wall or to an outside of the building, maybe even permanently mounted inside somewhere. They have a lot of different names for terminologies. The old terminology is CCTV, which stands for closed circuit television, which was normally any kind of security camera because it stayed on its own circuit. It wasn't open to the general public. It was a very private closed circuit system. Nowadays they come in IP and cabled form. They come in many different forms of cameras. You have the standard IR, which is infrared seeing. You have multi-spectrum cameras, and you even have military night vision NVR cameras, which we're not going to talk about today, but that is 3 different types of cameras that are out there, and then there's illuminators and all kinds of things. So we're going to cover as much as we possibly can. Let's talk about how these cameras work. Okay, first of all, the standard cameras come in 2 types. You either have cameras that are cable, which means they have a cable that runs from the camera back to a central viewing box or a DVR box, and they have some sort of way of connecting these together. The camera has a cable that generally provides electrical and audio and video, sometimes at least video, sometimes audio. The IP cameras work off of an internet address, and they actually have an IP assigned to them. They send a signal back to the router, and the router puts it through to some viewing software or viewing DVR. As we said before, there are 3 basic types of cameras: IR, which is an infrared camera; NVR camera, which is a night vision camera; and thermal imaging cameras. And we're not going to get too big into that. We're going to stick mainly with how the IR works, and that's what we're dealing with today. If we looked at the spectral range, as you can tell, there are numerous areas of visual contact in this, and within that range it's a very small area that's visible of light. Somewhere between 400 and 700 is the light visible that we can see. Okay, above the 700 marker, going up to to 1200, is the near infrared. That's the IR, and that's areas we can't see. And then below that's ultraviolet or UV. And so as we look at light in general, UV lights are what they usually use to see certain glow in the dark objects. Crime scenes use them when they use luminol, and you will see different places using UV. UV sometimes will show pet urine. It'll also show urine of other animals. It'll show up in a glow. Certain body secretions will cause UV to glow. So that's on the lower end. And then the infrared that we generally deal with on infrared cameras runs between 700 and about 900. although it comes back in a visible range of 400 to 700. Okay, so having said that, most of these cameras, and again, doesn't matter whether they're cabled or IP, they have two modes. They have infrared mode and daylight mode. Quick sip of Java. Anyway, daylight mode is your standard daylight running, and basically, you know, the camera has two areas, and infrared cameras are able to detect infrared energy or heat without being in close contact. Okay, so for digital cameras to detect that, you have to have two options. They use usually an infrared passing filter. Okay, so that allows the IR light to enter the camera and blocks visible light. Okay, the other passage in this camera has a visible light and it goes around the filter. So in daylight mode, it bypasses that filter, allows the light to come in, and you see the camera in a normal bright colored, day use, and it shows you everything you need to see. Now, as the light gets lower and sun begins to set and darkness begins to ensue, it begins to switch to the IR mode. Okay, at that point, it puts it, uses an infrared passing filter, and that will allow the IR to enter the camera, and in turn it blocks the visible light. Okay, so it goes out the other direction. Even though we can't see the IR light, when you look into the camera and it has IR illuminators, those are illuminators, those are diodes. They do show up red, but the actual IR of the camera you can't really see with your eyes. We process what the camera sees and it turns it into that image back into that visible range that we were talking about. This IR footage appears like it's black and white. Okay, what you're seeing is an approximation of how IR light would look if you could see it for yourself, and that's what the software in the camera is designed to do, is bring that into that black and white image. There are several types of IR cameras that are used. There are actually three main types. I'm sorry. One is active IR, one is passive IR, and one is smart IR. Okay. Now, when we talk about active IR, there's several components. Okay. Active IR has infrared illumination through IR nodes, LED nodes that are in the camera that shine off, and they look red when they're on. And it has a standard lens and standard IR camera within it. The big thing is it's illuminated. So a camera that has active IR, this means it actually produces infrared light. So it supplies its own infrared field, okay? And it uses either, like I said, the LED or laser diodes, and it illuminates a certain depth, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Passive IR, on the other hand, it has no illumination ability on the camera, no IRs. So passive cameras, that means basically they use whatever light, ambient light that's available, moonlight, parking lot lights. Now, if you are doing something in an area like a room that the lights never go off and they stay on 24/7, well, you really wouldn't need the IR illuminators. Most people have them so that the lights do go off, power shortage, whatever, the IR kicks in, they can still see in the dark. But passive uses whatever light is available to it, and it does do a good job. The software comes in, and I've got a picture there that illustrates a little bit of what that looks like. So it's kind of grainy. It's not nearly as good a picture if you have illuminators. Consequently, this also means IR devices are effectively blind when there's little or no light. So these are only going to work when there's some sort of light source they can gather off of. This is often the case for areas outside a building where there's no natural light sources, and they have parking lot lights. Well, that's what they use. You don't see as many passive IR anymore. It's not, unless it's a very small indoor camera of some sort. Now, let's talk about smart IR. Smart IR is a little different. It has automatic light balance, and it has illumination, it has the IR diodes, but it has that balance, which makes a big difference. If you see here, I've got two pictures here showing camera with smart IR and how it balances out the light. And compared to the one we showed you earlier for the active IR, this is a much better picture. Balances out, the focus is better, the quality of the image is better. Commercial grade cameras solved this problem a long time ago, and this is what you'll find in most of those. And it uses software that contains what they call HDR, high dynamic range, and this allows that image to better balance. Also, the light used from the IR illumination, depending on how far the camera needs its depth of focus and its range of IR. That's very important because that light will go further, and the further it goes, the better picture and the better focus you have on out, if in combination with the correct lens. Now, that sounds pretty long-haired, I know, but bear with me, we're going somewhere. Um, IR is used primarily to capture everything in the dark. It can see when you can't. And so a lot of times if we need more light than what's there, we use IR illuminators, and they're just think of it as a IR flashlight. It's a giant floodlight made of IR LEDs, and they can be small too. We use them on cameras in our group when we're filming by hand, and they're just a simple illuminator, and I have a picture of one. And it looks red when it lights up, very light red, but it actually shines out like a floodlight when you're looking through an IR lens. Now, let's talk about lenses for a minute. Okay, here's the biggest problem with most of these cameras. The lenses are real small. Now, if you look at the chart I've got up, the lens, the bigger the lens, the better the view, and the deeper the view, the more focus. A good sized lens with the proper software can certainly give you a wonderful picture. Now, viewed here, you will see on this lens chart 3mm, which is the standard lens that comes in most of these inexpensive cameras. Now, we use on Spirit, we use a 6mm lens made by Sony, and that lens gives us much more depth of field. But you can even go better than this. You get, I guarantee you, I'm just guessing, I don't know this I don't want to be quoted as knowing this for sure, but I guess the FBI building probably in Castleton, Indiana, more than likely has some very large lens cameras that can focus down. I guarantee you they can do facial imaging and license plates and everything on a dime. Although those cameras cost a great deal of money. The government has more money than we do, so we stick with the 6mm lens. We actually have 8 of these cameras, and they do a fantastic job. We've had them for a while, and we've gone through several cameras and found these to be about the best. Now, on this next chart, if you look, the size, it shows you the view starting at 3mm and it goes all the way up, and you can see how it gets better and is more capable of being auto zoomed in on a higher or a larger lens rather. One thing I will say is there's several combinations in a good camera. Having a good size lens, a proper amount of IR, the proper field of view, and the proper focal depth, but also good software built into the camera, because that allows you to do a lot, or at least good viewing software, which takes the camera image and allows you to blow it up. We use software that we can actually blow an image up quite a ways, and as long as it's got a good focal point, we do pretty well with it. Next time we're going to talk about field of view. Vertical and horizontal, you have to look at the field of view to make sure that it's not blocked. A lot of times with these cameras we find obstructions, or they're put near potential obstructions. If you put a camera where it's near a bird's nest, you're going to catch that bird flying back and forth. If you're putting it near plants, the plants may waver in and out. You'll also see spider webs from time to time. Spiders love to they're very photogenic. They love to get in front of a camera and make webs. And during the daytime, same way with wasps, you'll find them up on the camera occasionally. That happens, but if you can place it in a way that eliminates that, lighting can affect your field of view. If you have a porch light and you're putting it to left or right of the porch light comes on, that changes that IR. It may click it in a day mode, it may click it back and forth, you may get a worse image when that happens. It certainly can be a consideration. The other thing is where does the sun rise and set? If you put it facing into the east during the morning hours, you will not have a camera until that sun gets above that point that it can see. Same thing if you set in the west. The evening, you're going to lose your camera to dark. So you got to be careful think real hard on how you put in these cameras. That can affect a lot of the data that we get back in. I've seen pictures people have sent me, and all it is a whiteout due to the fact of light source. So it's not a ghost. It's not a ghost standing in front of the camera. It's your porch light coming on or the sun coming up, and it's whiting out that ability on the camera. So again, something to think about. I don't mind at all. Don't be afraid to send me images. I do want to say that. I don't want anybody to think, oh God, he's going to make fun of us. No, that's not the case. I'm not making fun of it anyway. It just is you never dealt with cameras before, so you probably did not know these do that. That's why I say get some good YouTube videos about placement and security setups, and there's a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of guys that do good work, and they can show you this. Next thing we need to talk about is depth of focus. The depth of the field is in front of the camera to the back zone of the camera. So field of view, think of it as from the point of the camera as far as the IR and the lens will focus out in combination. Okay, um, you know, it's more the seen near to far in the focus is what you're looking at. So how far with that camera, and I'm not talking facial recognition software, we're talking how far out can you recognize Joe being Joe and not just being an image. And then you get blurred images from that point forward. So your focal point's where you can't see him clearly enough to know he's, and that's my way of explaining it. So get a camera that has a deep focal point. If you look at it, it'll tell you how, the camera should tell you the size of the lens, how far the IR shoot, or it may just say that it's good for up to 80 feet at night. But you know, day focus maybe, you know, depth of focus may be different than IR depth of focus. So you should have a setting there that tells you at the maximum what the camera will focus at. If the camera is good for 80 feet, then you can shoot 80 feet. If your barn's 120 foot off, well, you better put the camera halfway, or you better get a better camera. So you know, think that in mind. We talked a little bit about daylight mode, and we've kind of covered that, but I'm going to give you a good example, and we're going to talk on that in just a few minutes more. Here's a picture of a standard camera in daylight mode. This is shooting down the side of an old house I used to live in. Since infrared can interfere with color images, most IR cameras have that cutoff filter that blocks that. So during the daytime, it's going through and bypassing the filter. At night, as we talked about, it switches back and goes back into the filtering system. A true day-night camera would generally block out all IR light, okay? And that also includes your handheld, you know, we're talking Olympus, Nokia's, Nikon's, I mean, any of those cameras will do that. Now, for a standard camera to see IR, they have, you know, the only way to do that is get around that IR blocking filter. Again, they have modes where they either, the IR filter comes in and back out and switches in and out mechanically, or it bypasses it. Not all infrared cameras are created equal. That's the first thing I want to say. There's some of those that are better than others. Again, you know, if I was doing it, and I'll be honest with you, I've got some 3mm in my personal, you know, array here at the house. But you can do 3mm. It's not bad, because 6mm is more expensive. You're going to pay more for it. But if you can get a 3mm with decent software in it, in other words, made by a pretty decent brand that's focal, or a better viewing software, that will help. It doesn't have to be a big name. You know, we use Sony because we like the Sony cameras, and we found them to be pretty decent. There are, and I'm not sponsoring anybody, nor am I recommending anybody, but there are a lot of no-names out there. I've got a brand of no-names I use. They're about 50 bucks. They're outside cameras. They're fantastic, and they're a higher resolution, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. So those cameras work really well, okay? So again, well worth the expense. Now, viewing software. Viewing software can make all the difference in the world, but you're not going to see what release or who makes that. That's on a really heavy tech spec sheet, and you usually see those in commercial cameras. So your ROs, your Nest, all those others aren't going to show you who makes that software. It's a proprietary software, and they're not going to show it. But sometimes you can use other viewing programs. I like Blue Iris. I've used it for a long time. I've also used IP Viewer, which is what I currently use now as IP Viewer. I like both of those really well. Now, real quickly, there are some other cameras that are out there, some different stationaries, and they're called 360s or 720 cameras. They have this optical, what I call fisheye view, and basically, we'll give you an example here. Here's a picture of one of them, and it shows the view of what they get. These cameras are able to view 360 degrees. They've been used a few times by paranormal groups, especially the TV paranormal groups. They're great, but they rely greatly on the software. The software, basically, it's a multitude of cameras through a fisheye lens view, and they put them together with the software seamless. If it's good software, seamlessly, and it looks pretty decent. Some of them actually use the true 360 lens, fisheye lens, which is a more expensive camera. But again, you know, you hover over the image, you run your software, it de-warps that, makes it seamless again. And you can look in different directions. So the camera is basically viewing 360 degrees all the time. It's great, but the picture isn't near as good, and I find it's better to have 3 cameras to do the job that the 360 would do one of. They're just not quite where they need to be yet. So, alright, having said that, and I do want you to understand, the 360s still have their place. There are certain things in paranormal investigation. We don't have one currently, but we're thinking about getting one. And these are great cameras in the fact that you can use them to look around with and see, you know, if you're in a room, it would see something moving in the room. But again, the image, it just isn't quite there. So something to think about on that. Also, they're usually a lower resolution, and they take up a lot more space on a hard drive because the images are multiplexed in, and they are space hog. So, you know, be aware of that. Okay. Now, let's talk about problems with the placement of these cameras. We started a little bit of that, but let's finish that. First of all, I'm going to set this up here. This is an example of a good blocked location. I'm putting this graphic up. Now let's examine why consumer grade cameras are better. Cameras are often poor vision and performers, and part of it's the camera, but the other part of it's the homeowner. It's what they do with the camera. We talked about the lenses being smaller. We talked about the IR illumination distance, or IR lume distance. The IR distance, that's big. Get one at least it's 80 feet at the very minimum is my recommendation. Again, I said I wasn't going to do that, but 80 feet is good. And make sure, people go, well, it doesn't say where it's passive or active IR or smart IR. Most of them this day and age, they probably aren't going to say that. If they have LEDs, you can see them around the camera, they're either active or smart. That eliminates passive. So at that point, you have to talk to them and say, hey, is this a smart IR? It should say somewhere about white balancing. If it says white balancing or image balancing, it's a smart IR. So higher quality IRs can illuminate objects 150, 200 feet away. We're talking 45 meters to 80 meters easy. So that is something worthwhile. Now, here's a picture of a very low quality night vision camera. It might have multiple IDs, and this one, or LEDs rather. I'm sure this one has some IRs, but the problem is the IRs are focused toward the center. It brightens the object several feet away, but everything behind it's dark and black, and the image is lightening and is illuminating. You can't really make it out real well. It's a kind of a bad picture, and it provides inadequate distance, or if there's not enough distance. If this camera shot 40 feet, I don't think it can shoot that. I think this is probably a 10 or 15 foot IR camera, and it really needs more illumination. Now, you also have to watch from blowout, and that's from overexposure, whiteout, blowout. It's got several different terminologies, and here's another picture. This means that typically overexposure is to what is nearby in the scene. It's the IR is reflecting, and IR will reflect off non-reflective surfaces. If a human stands too close to it, and it's not an IR smart camera, it won't adjust that balance, and we get this washout effect. Also, if you're too near a light source, or if you're bouncing the IR illumination off of a shiny surface, it's coming back in the camera, this is what you're going to get. Commercial cameras are always equipped with smart IR, and you're going to pay a little more for them, but not always. Like I said, some of the ones I'm getting for around $50 to $75, $150 at most, and you get a decent camera. And yes, you have to build it camera by camera, but you may find, I started off with I think about 3 cameras many years ago, and I'd be walking around our garden. We really need to be able to see this side of the house because it's not real visible from the street. And hey, and this is before I moved, so we got a camera for that. And then we really need one for this back area. It doesn't have a lot of light at night. And before long, we had 11 cameras. Actually, I think we had 8 before we moved to where we're at now. And then I just enjoyed having the cameras and being able to view everything. So, all that is said, resolution is another big thing. Okay, you'll see some cameras that say 1080, 4K. Some are low resolution. You're looking in the 4 to 600s. Basically, and I'm going to set up a picture here. These are 2 pictures. The first one is a 1080p camera, and then the second one is a 4K, and we're going to put that up here in just a second. And you can see there's not a whole lot of difference there, and I'm going to put them side by side so you can see them. And again, the difference, it's very hard to tell the difference. Now, if you're saving them to a hard drive or DVR, there's a big difference because that 4K takes up a lot more room. 1080 will do you fine. It will do most everything you want to do. It'll give you a clean, clear picture with no problem. And I think that, you'll be happier with that image, honestly. It's a lot less expensive than 4K. Although if you wish to go 4K, it's about $50 more camera and can be more expensive than that depending on the camera. Again, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between 1080p and 4K resolution. The one major benefit you get with 4K resolution is to be able to resolve the detail in very small things when you blow it up. So if you blow up a license plate or a person, you'll be able to see it much better. It'll be much more detailed than with 1080p. That's if you have the proper software to do it. Again, this is something to think about. Cheap consumer grade cameras usually don't offer this, and usually they're around 480 in resolution, sometimes 520, 560. It just depends, but they're a lot lower resolution. The good cameras, again, are things that we got to talk about, and we've driven this point home, is high dynamic resolution, high IR range, high depth of focus, good quality, good size lens, and a decent resolution. Now we're going to talk about obstruction. Okay, here's another problem we get. And this obstruction was in the placement. You can see here you've got some exterior, there's an obstruction. Next photo, we get exterior backlighting and washout, and this becomes a very big issue. Don't put it in front of trees that move a lot or small bushes, because that'll set your alarm off each and every time. You're going to learn a lot of things when you place these cameras. Some of them could be triggered by squirrels, they can be triggered by birds. So things to keep in mind, you don't want it near a bird's nest, because every time that bird flies out, it's going to set that alarm off. I don't leave alarms on mine. It's probably, in my mind, I'd rather just record it and come back and look at it if I need to. But it's still there. Very elemental software in these, so you've got to remember placing it is very, very important for the alarm and everything else, because the software is very elemental. Natural occurrences. There's a lot of things that people always talk about reading them and misread. And I'm going to put up some different photos here. The first one is a fog. Okay, and I've had people think that there's something, a ghost standing in front of the camera. No, that's fog. Okay, and you're going to get that. Snow is another interesting element. We have the next one here. This is high humidity. This is a really hot summer day, and the humidity range, you can see the humidity hanging in the air. The camera actually captures it. The next one, we're going to talk about some natural occurrences such as bugs and spiders. First one here, that's a spider web coming across. Wonderful little translucent web. That guy's working up something neat, and it comes across the camera. The next one is actually a spider. That is the, and everybody says, oh, that's the head and the body. I don't know where that's the end of the spider, beginning of the spider, but the IR is reflecting off of it. It's causing that white out or blown out condition that we were talking about. And then the next one is also a spider, and you see it coming down from the top of the porch, and it's coming across. We also have one here, and this is a little video clip. I'm going to put this in. This is of a bird that flies across the screen. Okay, and then we're going to talk about rain. Okay, rain, it looks like a bunch of droplets. Snow looks about the same way. Snow also reflects a lot of the IR light. It becomes brighter in the picture. We have a photo of lightning. Here's lightning. This is what that looks like. And you see the washout. You get that blown out washout, white out effect. Big part of this is knowing how to look at and realize what you've got. Don't automatically assume it's a ghost. Okay, don't panic. Look at it first. If you're not having any other problems in the house, I've had several people send me exterior shots and say, this has got to be a ghost. And I say, okay, what else do you have going on? What other things are happening inside or outside the house? Oh, we don't have anything. Matter of fact, in one case, a gentleman who was very nice, he was restoring a rental. He is a double, and he was working on one side, had residents on the other side. He told me the residents weren't experiencing anything. He hadn't experienced anything in the house. He was just getting these photographs of these things on the camera. I can just about 99% chance guarantee you the house is not haunted. These are just, they're false positives you're getting in some very inexpensive cameras. So let's look at that. And again, how you review that footage. Look at it, think about what else could affect that camera, what's around the camera, and think about it. Again, don't be afraid to send them in. We gladly we'll look at them and try to do everything we can to help you out. Now, I want to thank the following people who gave their permission to use some of these photographs you see here, some of these false positives. And these were cases that were sent in to me. I'd like to thank Vinny, Robin, Crystal, and Mike for sending these in. I really appreciate these, because and I appreciate the permission to be able to use them in these videos, because I think this helps straighten out a lot of problems that a lot of people are having. So with that in mind, remember, when buying security cameras, what you see in the camera, don't automatically panic. Your house is probably not haunted. There are dust that shows up. I get a lot of people that send me orb photographs, and orbs are actually dust. It takes a really discerning eye to tell the difference between ghosts, dust, orbs. And we will be having a video here in the very near future, so look for it on orbs. But I will tell you that, you know, again, this is something that you don't need to panic about. I don't believe your house is haunted, but I do believe you need to take a look real well and make sure you see what's there and you know what's there. So I think that's good. From Spirit and all the members of Spirit, we thank you for watching. We'd like to ask you to go to YouTube and subscribe and like our videos. We ask you to Facebook and follow us. We ask you to follow us on Instagram. Again, you know, smash that subscribe key. You know, hit the bell key so you know when the next one's coming out. We're trying to get back on a weekly cycle. We had a little skip there, but we're going to be back, and keep looking for our videos. Again, if you'd like to contact us, it's www.spiritindiana.com, and our email is info@spiritindiana.com. Reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. There's links on the website for the Facebook, Instagram, and for YouTube. Again, thank you for watching.